Hello and welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm David Price.
And David, on this week's riff, what are we going to be talking about?
Something very big and heavy, Mike. Almost as big and heavy as you.
Well, what can I say? Look at me. Almost. It's a lot bigger and heavier than I am, I'm sure.
Do you weigh 46 kilograms?
I'll tell you something. We just tried to lift it because we wanted to get it in the shot, and that wasn't going to happen, was it?
No.
It's just unbelievable. And it is the...
Musical Fidelity M8xi.
The M8xi.
I beg your pardon?
M8xi.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah. M8xi. Excellent.
All right.
I just made that up.
Yes, I hope so.
The M8xi, which is a rather beefy, to say the very least, integrated amplifier from Musical Fidelity, isn't it?
It's very beefy. It makes most Krells look like a NAD 3020.
Well, you've said the magic word there, haven't you? Because actually, they have always reminded me, these big Musical Fidelity amplifiers have always reminded me of Krells. Yeah. And I remember going back into the sort of, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s, when I was in retail, and we used to sell Musical Fidelity when Anthony Michelson was at the helm. Yep. And they used to have amps like the P270, P370, the 470, which were just ridiculously huge.
Yeah.
And I think Anthony Michelson, didn't he say something to you along the lines of, because he was a Krell fan, wasn't he?
Well, yes and no. I think he was, he kind of liked the concept, but he wasn't very happy that, Krell buyers weren't buying his massive amps, if that makes any sense.
Sure, yeah.
So he kind of once said to me, why don't people buy my amps when Krells are twice the price and half as good, or words to that effect, I think.
I've got to have a bit of sympathy for him here, because actually, now I have never heard the 370 or the 470 because they're just stuff of hi-fi myths and legends.
Yes.
But the 270 I have heard, and I was really quite impressed by it. Now, I probably shouldn't say this again as trouble, but I was never a huge fan of their preamps, but I thought that power amplifier was absolutely something to behold. But again, it was like a four-man lift.
Yes.
Which actually, I think this isn't far off a four-man lift, to be fair. We couldn't move it between us, could we?
No, so, we've got superhuman powers.
We have, yes.
So, especially after that pint of Peroni earlier.
At the Hi-Fi Pub.
At the Hi-Fi Pub,
which is very nice indeed. Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah.
And even with the bag of salted peanuts, it didn't increase my Popeye like strength to the level I could move this M8 Kiss.
Yes, I mean, it amused me because you said, should we pick it up? It's like,
yes, no.
Like,
I didn't quite realise it was on reflection, it was such a naive comment.
It's not an A1.
It must have the biggest transformers in it on the planet. Yes. I mean, they're just because it's a dual mono design, isn't it?
Yeah.
So effectively.
Yeah.
But the two toroidals.
Yeah, so I think those two toroidal transformers are bigger than mini wheels, basically.
It's just something to behold, isn't it? It's just amazing.
But this amp has got quoted 550 watts RMS per channel.
Into
8 ohms, and a mere tiny 870 into 4.
That's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous. 870 watts. When we were playing your NS1000s, which I've got to say, having spent a lot of time with them now, aren't the easiest things to drive. It was just mere bagatelle, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was just dead easy.
So, I mean, I've reviewed many amps over the years, and most of the amps I've reviewed are kind of huffing and puffing when you really hit, turn the loud pedal up, as it were. You kind of really get some volume. Even amps which are kind of 110 watts per channel, 90 watts per channel, that kind of thing, they can drive them pretty well, but there's still a sense of like, I'm really knackered, can I have a rest? Because they're obviously sealed box, they're quite difficult low to drive as well.
Quite.
Yes. And But this Musical Fidelity amp, it's like they were like Wharfdale Diamonds.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Incredible.
Yeah. It made them sound super efficient. Yeah. It makes you wonder if there was actually a challenge for them, if there was a pair of speakers which it couldn't drive. I can't imagine it with that level of power. Well, and you really notice it with your thousands on the bottom end, don't you? Because I've heard them sound not very good if they're not driven very
Gloopy.
well. That's a good word.
Yeah.
But you know, the bass is just, I mean, it's just in abundance, isn't it? With this I was going to say little amplifier, with this massive amplifier. It's just in abundance, isn't it? It just keeps on coming.
Yeah, it keeps on coming relentlessly, and it's really tight.
Yes.
So you begin to realise the benefit of a sealed box infinite baffle cabinet.
Yeah.
When you've got an amplifier that can really drive these speakers to high volumes, and it just pummels you with bass, and the bass is like an LED going on and off.
Sure.
Instead of a kind of blah, blah. But you put, you know, even my Sony TAN86 power amp, which is a great power amp, it's 90 watts per channel.
Yeah.
That thing is going blah, blah, into the bass at high volumes through the NS1000s. It just doesn't have the guts to drive.
No.
But the music fidelity is like,
it's just dead easy.
Yeah.
But it comes at a price, so it's 6,000.
Yes,
it's 6,000 and something, I think, isn't it?
6,799
GBP. Yeah,
at the moment.
Okay.
So it's not cheap.
But you get a lot for that.
You do.
You really get an awful. You only got to look at the sheer, you know, bulk of the thing to realise that it's not just some play product, is it? It's the real McCoy. It's a real deal.
Yeah.
I actually defy you to find a sort of similar amplifier for a similar price. I think, you know, you'd have to be looking at sort of super amps, wouldn't you? Of the sort of Krell era, Krell Erk, if you like.
Yeah.
To get the sort of same amount of hardware.
Well, even though this amp is obviously you know, made and sold now in the post-Anthony Michelson generation of music fidelity, Heinz Littenegger is now obviously running the company.
Yes.
The DNA of this amp goes very much back into the kind of Michelson era. And, you know, again, I remember Anthony, and I have to choose my words carefully here because it's a family show. But he when he launched the KW power amps, which must have been 15 years ago, you know, he was saying, oh, you know, what you really need, because also, by the way, he used NS1000s as his own reference speakers.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
He said, David, what you really need is a big F-off amplifier to really drive those things, you know, no messing around with these small integrateds and etc. And so he came up with the KWs, which were kilowatts, you know.
Yes.
Very, very, very powerful. You know, he said, oh, optimally you need sort of at least 500 watts of working power, you know. And I'm kind of, whoa, I'm not sure about that, Anthony. But actually, he's kind of had a point.
I get it, yes.
You know, you can see, certainly in a large room, you know, with tricky speakers, infinite baffle, you know, go down to a low, you know, we heard the difference. I mean,
yes.
I don't think you've heard my NS1000s sound so grippy, tight and strong in the bass.
No. And also, we were playing some really challenging music as well. I mean, we were playing some dodgy old 80s recordings. I mean, if you listen to, I mean, I'm a fan of the. Here we go. I'm a fan of the band.
Yeah.
But I mean, the recording quality is awful, and that's like Marillion. So you've got this sort of sight and sound thing, which is their greatest hits. But you know, I've got a couple of originals as well. They've even got some of this on high res, and it still sounds terrible.
Yeah.
We played a sassing, and it's like my ears are going to bleed. But despite that, the bottom end is still completely under control, isn't it? Totally amazing,
it's
really.
like you've
got the best I've ever heard it, to be fair.
It's like you've got your head in the bass guitar amp, basically.
Honestly, it is like that. Actually, it is very much like that. And then, actually, to be fair, Kaylee was better, Heart of Lothian were better because they're better recordings, but, you know, but still a challenge. But it was, you know, it's great to chuck a challenge from time to time. In hi-fi, there's this dreadful habit of just playing music that sounds great because it's really well recorded, even though it's totally crap music generally. And it's quite nice for a change to actually listen to music which is good. I mean, you may not like Marillion, you may not agree with that, but music which you actually like, which is not very well recorded. And that's really what tests your system the most, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've, you know, the interesting thing is if you've got big full range speakers and you've got an amp that can really drive them, then you hear stuff that you just don't normally with normal hi-fi systems. So another great track is Maps and Legends by REM.
Great song,
which we didn't play today.
Great song.
I was listening to them. I was reviewing the new B&W 801's D4 signatures last week.
Just name drop.
Yes, with a couple of really big Rotel M8xi amps, and the bass coming out of that was just breathtaking. You know.
I bet they're really good, actually.
Yeah, they are really very good. Yeah, absolutely. But the point is that when you get into the world of super amps, and this is, I think the M8X is basically a kind of budget super amp. It's a budget integrated super amp. It's like a kind of, Krell, but sort of cheap. In relative terms, it's not cheap.
That's meant as a compliment, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a kind of poor man's Krell.
Yes,
which I think is actually in many ways sounds better. But it has an incredible bass driving and current drive, and with big full range speakers, it's got to be at least 3 ways. Kind of isobaric NS1000 801s, maybe 802s, that kind of thing. You hear the song in a different way, don't you?
You really do. Yeah, you really do. Yeah. And actually, I really like it. And I think as for an integrated amplifier, I think it's pretty flipping ultimate. It's really cool for a one box trick. It's even got a DAC in it.
Yeah. So I mean, the interesting thing to me is that it's actually devoid of gadgets. Apart from that, the only thing it's got is a
very
DAC.
Minimalist. Actually.
It really, it's very minimalist. No streamer, no headphone stage, no phono stage. So it's almost like they've focused on the essentials, and they've kind of put a DAC in it just to kind of tick a box. And the DAC is, I think it's a Texas Instruments PCM 5242. It's not sort of famously, it's not like kind of DAC of the month, and it's not my favourite DAC chip kind of territory, as it were.
You know, taxi drivers.
Yeah.
They do the knowledge.
Yeah.
And they have to learn all of the London streets. If you're a hi-fi journalist, do you have to learn every single DAC number? Because you just sort of reel them off, all these DAC numbers. It's just, how do you...
Well, it's... so there's a lot of people who, pay attention to this sort of stuff, Mike.
Yes.
You need to uprate your sadness quotient.
It makes me smile every time how good your sadness quotient is.
Thank you.
How good it
well,
is.
This DAC chip, before I was so rudely interrupted, has got no DSD, and it's basically, I think it's 24192. So it's not a kind of super amazing thing. It sounds perfectly good, but we preferred the Hugo TT2, didn't we? Which is the sort of going into line ends.
We always seem to prefer the Hugo TT2, though.
Absolutely.
To be fair, it is absolutely class, and I think we're sort of doing the musical fidelity DAC down a bit. But the DAC, and you said this, I'm quoting you. The DAC isn't as good as the amp.
Absolutely, The DAC's fine, but
it's fine.
The amp is great.
Yes,
I think.
Yeah. In fact, the reason why we had to swap is we were listening to this, which is Lexicon of Love by ABC, which is an album which, gosh, we've been listening to since it came out in the
82.
I was going to say, when we were whippersnappers. And actually, this is quite a difficult album.
Yes,
because it can be quite bright.
Yep.
It can be quite challenging. It's really actually there's a lot of detail in here.
There is,
and great tunes, great album, but difficult to reproduce.
Yeah.
And actually, that was the reason why we swapped away from the musical fidelity DAC back to the chord, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because it was just a little bit on the edge.
Yeah, it just sounded. It didn't quite have the kind of subtlety and nuance of the chord DAC.
No.
But the point is, this is almost like it's an old school 80s amp with a DAC added for convenience, which is fine. It's not trying to be the world's greatest DAC. But you compare that to rivals like the Rotel M8xi X5, which I reviewed a few years ago, I think for StereoNET. The Rotel looks kind of more swish. It's got way more functions, lots of extra bits and pieces. The internal DAC plays virtually everything, sort of really high so high resolution capability, etc. So the musical fidelity by comparison is almost the same price, but it's much more kind of like an 80s minimalist amp, I think. And even the display tells you virtually nothing.
Sure,
It just sort of tells you the volume control and the source.
For me, the opposite for this was the Marantz PM10, which we reviewed, which has everything on it, Class D and blah, blah, you know, all bells and whistles. Should have been amazing, but I wanted it to sound like this. I wanted it to have that control in the bottom end and that, you know, that sort of really beguiling bass, stick your head in the bass bin, you know, that kind of effect. And it didn't quite have it for me. But I mean, a great amp in other ways, because it had lots of gizmos and gadgets and goodies, but sonically for me, I prefer this by quite a margin.
Well, that Marantz, the PM10, it's got Encore Class D chips. It's really good, really well made. Class
Stunningly
D.
good,
But it just doesn't sound as musical to me as this.
No.
So I don't think this amp is the best amp in the world by any means. But I think for $6.5 grand, $7 grand, you're really going to struggle to find something that sounds as good
heavier
and as loud. And has made work for as many osteopaths.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, they should be sponsoring this video.
But it kind of does an awful lot of good things without being the best on the planet in anything.
Yes.
You know, I don't know if $6.5, $7 grand is affordable, but it's not really affordable to me. But the point is that if you want a mega amp, it's affordable.
Yes.
You know, in mega amp terms. And you've got the that.
Well,
this was fun, wasn't it?
It was. This is actually, look at that, a really nice Japanese pressing of the Orb Adventures Beyond the Ultra World, which is brilliant. And we played Little Fluffy Clouds on this, and it was kind of, you know, proper foot tapper.
And the vocalist on that is
I think it's Ricky Lee Jones who's in the background, who's talking about clouds in Arizona.
Tried
and stuff,
to catch you out there, Mike. Failed.
There we go. You see, name of Ricky Lee. So I really like this style of music with it. It's got a real pump to it, hasn't it? Real energy. Because I don't think this needs to be all that subtle and nuanced.
No,
it's just a, you know, proper, you know, stomp along sort of track, isn't it? So, but that worked really, really well for me. But I mean, it's also got this amazing. I know it's physically big and heavy, but it's got this presence to it, hasn't it? You know, you look at the amplifier in the room and it's like, it's the first thing you see. It's just this huge box, and I think if you owned it, everyone would say, you know, good grief, you know, look at that, it's a spaceship, it's enormous.
It's a shame it's in black, because it makes your room darker. So big
sucks
it
in,
just absorbs light.
Sucks in all the
kind
light.
of hi-fi black hole.
There you go. There you go. Excellent. Let's do a riffometer on it. What are you going to give it?
So I'm going to give it 9. I really like it. I'm not saying I think it's the best amplifier I've ever heard by a long shot. It doesn't have the kind of ultra detail and finesse of a really high-end, you know, solid state amp. But in a kind of bang per buck sense, I think it's better than the Rotel M8xi. I think it's considerably better than the Marantz PM10. And I'm struggling to think of anything that really kind of, you know, does better at the price. And it's focused on sound quality, and it's focused on muscle, and it's very well built. My main criticism, I'm going to do a bit of a mic here.
Oh gosh, here we go.
So the remote control is like, so you can't really turn it on. I don't think there's an on-off switch here. And it's not very responsive, you know. So there you go. So that's my my mic moment. Of course, it doesn't do Rune either, Mike. So
that's
no Rune on an integrated amp. So that's why we're marking it down 1. So.
No, well, I think, you know, I think 9's a really fair score, and I totally and utterly get it. I think it's, you know, an absolute cracker. And in terms of bang for the buck, then wow, it's astonishing, isn't it? So I'm going to match your 9. And I think it's worth every single point on there. You know, really cool, really cool product. You've had it in your system for ages now.
Yes.
That doesn't sound like saying much, but for those of people who have watched Hi-Fi Riff regularly, you'll know that David's system doesn't very often change from his core components. It's very unusual for you to have a product in your system for this long.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, I've enjoyed having it, and I'm not enjoying the prospect of having to give it back, not because it's great sounding. It's just I can't move the bloody thing.
It was really funny. We were talking earlier about if you were trying to equate it to a car, what would it be? And we decided whatever it is, it would definitely be a V8.
Yes.
And the irony is, you need a V8 to get it back to musical fidelity.
JCB.
So, excellent. And on that note, look, thanks very much for watching this episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye.